Good afternoon and hello. I'm Lauren Sonnenberg with LifeCore and welcome to this week's edition of Mind Body Talk on chronic pain. And as promised over the last couple of weeks, we are talking about gout today and specifically GNM or German New Medicine's take on gout, which provides a rich understanding about gout that we've never had before. And so this is beautiful, crucial information. And so let's dive right in, and I'll try to bring you up to speed a little bit. If you've never heard about German New Medicine, I'll give you a little bit here, but ultimately, since we're talking about the combination of, from a German New Medicine perspective, we're talking about gout being the combination of arthritis mixed with this other biological program. And since I spent the last 3 weeks talking about arthritis, variations upon that, and also looking at the self-evaluation conflicts involved, I'm not going to go into detail on that part of the gout system. I am going to talk much more today about the other piece. And then, so for anybody who has gout or who wants to understand this more, I would highly suggest you checking out those last 3 weeks. Every Thursday at 2 p.m. You can go back in the LifeCore Facebook feed, or I also have these videos on YouTube as well. Although last week's one, it hasn't made it up there yet. There's a reason why. We're making a correction or two. So if you're joining me today, feel free to say hi and say where you're from, what your interest is in chronic pain, or if you're just wanting to learn about German New Medicine. Very good. So German New Medicine looks at the biological conflicts, or as I like to call them, bioemotional conflicts that give rise to specific biological programs that play out in the body. Now that's an oversimplification, but in short, it really looks at the science of the mind-body connection. And it's also, you can see the proof of this on brain scans, meaning that every single organ or tissue that's involved in the particular programs that are being discussed with a particular disease, you can actually see that relay location lit up on the brain scan. It's a set of concentric rings, and depending upon what phase of the program it's in, whether it's conflict active or the conflict's been resolved and we're in the healing phase, it will show up differently. It'll look slightly different on the brain scan. We're not going to get into all of that today, but I wanted to just begin today's talk with a little overview in case you're totally brand new to this. So let's assume that you're not, and that you've been following a little bit about the arthritis and the programs that we talked about in the last 3 weeks. I'm going to give you a little overview here, a little visual. My little GNM kind of diagram here. I can never quite get the angle right, so apologize for the visual confusion there. So what we have with these two programs, I'm on my tippy toes so you can actually see me and the diagram here. So arthritis, as we talked about in the last couple of weeks, happens, okay, your self-evaluation conflict happens here, and if you resolve that, then you get into this healing phase, and that's when the arthritis shows up in the joint area. Okay, so much more about it in the last 3 weeks, but that's the in short part right now. And then in this first part, this is called actually PCLA, this is the first half of that healing phase, there's going to be an edema that's happening in that joint area of the body. Now, what happens with gout? So gout, again, is arthritis plus, okay? We have a biological program that's actually running concurrently. Remember, okay, we have arthritis happening here in the healing phase, but if we concurrently, at the same time, have a conflict of a specific type, I'm going to define it very shortly, happening here, we then have gout show up. Now, what's happening here when we have arthritis showing up at the same time as this other program is a abandonment or existence conflict that's in the conflict active phase. So right? At that point, we're seeing more water retention because that abandonment existence conflict in the conflict active phase has water retention. And remember when I just said about that first half of the healing phase with the arthritis also has water retention, and water retention is going to create more swelling. Therefore, whatever pain exists there is going to be exacerbated. Now, even further in that epicrisis portion of the, oh, here, I was already at it here, this little peak here. When we hit that epicrisis portion of the arthritis and healing, that's when you're going to have that gout attack. That's when it's going to be the peak of the pain. So now let's talk about all of this. Now, in terms of how we would go about addressing the conflict that is oftentimes very chronic with the, hey, Daryl, how you doing? That's often very chronic with the arthritic component. We talked about how we would handle that in the past 3 weeks videos. Now, but today, with this abandonment existence conflict that's in combination with this self-evaluation in healing, it affects the kidney collecting tubules. So there are a number of parts of the kidneys. We're not going to go over all parts of those today, and that would be a very long video. But the kidney collecting tubules, evolutionarily speaking, are the oldest tissue of the kidneys. And this conflict, this abandonment or existence conflict that's happening for a person, is very much like the feeling like a fish out of water conflict. You're swept out of your familiar surroundings, you lost your pack, you're separated from your pack, you're isolated or alone. And we can see it happening in a couple of ways. So I would say, for sure, you could see abandonment conflicts, existence conflicts. You could even say a refugee conflict. And they all have slight variations, although they all have the same impact on the KCTs, or the kidney collecting tubules. Okay, so let's first look at the abandonment conflict. And let's just say, what if you're somebody watching and you happen to have gout? You may want to listen to, okay, do I feel like, do any of these really seem to apply to me? I would never, don't try to force the square peg in the round hole, but if you're, oh wow, that is exactly what's going on for me, that's going to be helpful information. So just kind of log that in your mind, and if you have questions, you can write them out there, or you can message me later on, or you could even set up a consult or join my free pain group. It's a Facebook group. So there are lots of ways I can help you. So if any of this information is, if it feels like a lot at any point, just write down your questions and I'll help you through it. So, okay, with the abandonment conflict, it may come about when you're feeling, obviously, if a person is literally abandoned, say maybe at birth, that could definitely feel, that's going to be an abandonment conflict. If you feel unwanted, if you feel isolated, left out, alone, ignored, misunderstood, excluded from the group, unloved, that can be experienced as an abandonment conflict. Anytime you have a loss of safety and or emotional shelter, that can trigger this abandonment conflict. For example, and I'm not saying that every single child who goes to daycare experiences abandonment conflict, but it's an out of my normal surrounding experience, especially maybe the first couple of times. It can be experienced as that because they're out of the safety of their parents and their home environment. So that can happen for them. When somebody goes to a nursing home to live and they're out of their normal environment. Now, some people adapt and adjust. Hey, no problem. Maybe they're just looking forward to all the new people, and other people are like, I don't have my home, I don't have my belongings, I don't have any of my people around me that I'm used to having, and that can be experienced as an abandonment conflict. Pets, when pets are left alone, or not with, or even not alone, but just not with the people they're used to, they can suffer an abandonment conflict. Not all pets, but this can happen frequently. Now, existence conflicts fall under this umbrella. can come about when you feel like your existence is threatened in some way. For example, oftentimes, if we have an unexpected cancer diagnosis or some negative prognosis, this can be experienced as an existence conflict. Feeling like my life is at stake, that can be experienced as such. How about when maybe you just went to the ER or you're in the ambulance and you're not with people that you know and you're feeling like kind of out of your element and you're scared for your safety, you're not sure what's going to happen next, or you're at the hospital and you don't have your family members around, and scary things are happening, or you feel uncared for. Maybe the ER is super busy and you're just sitting there alone and you're feeling like, oh my goodness, this is that can be experienced as an existence conflict when that fear is surrounding that. It could be like the self-talk that could go on in the mind could be like, okay, I have lost everything. That type of self-talk. Anytime you feel like you've lost something that provides security, such as, hi, Dr. Bagnell, how you doing? Thanks for joining in. And so security, like loss of an income, loss of a person who provided the money or the financial security for the household, that type of thing can cause an existence conflict. Now, refugee conflicts, such as you would imagine, as you know, refugees are thrown out of they're taken out of the land that they're used to. Maybe they go to a place they don't even speak the language. They may not have a place to stay. Most times they don't, obviously. Or even if they do, like a shelter, it's not their home, it's not their normal surroundings. They don't have their belongings. They don't have, the pictures on the wall. You don't have the blanket that makes you feel comfortable. You don't sometimes even have food and water. So when all of that's threatened, that can be this refugee conflict. It could even be something like, I moved to a new neighborhood. Children who they had all their friends and now they have to move somewhere else. Some people just adapt and adjust to that without blinking. Other people, it's too much of a big shock and a shift for them. Even sometimes travel for people, air travel can prompt this. Not, you don't see that quite as frequently, but it could happen. So abandonment, existence, and refugee conflicts fall under this fish out of water experience. Now, when that biological conflict is active, okay, then what we see are the cells in the kidney collecting tubules proliferate, they grow. What is the biological purpose? And I'm going to also say this. Now, in the beginning, I just did a little bit of a review on German New Medicine, but what I didn't say is that there's always a function for the biological program that occurs. Things that we've called disease are actually a biological function and response. So let's look at it here. The function of the kidney collecting tubule cells, when they grow, when we have this proliferation, is to close that excretion filter. In order that we withhold water so that we have a better chance to survive. Think of this. Let's go back to, I have this experience transposed in some sense. Obviously, we're not fish, but feeling like a fish out of water. Just imagine this. Imagine you somehow get dropped off in the desert without food or water. Biologically, holding on to that water is going to help your survival. This is an innate water retention program. This is really miraculous, our programming. And we need, as everybody knows, we need water. It keeps our metabolic processes ongoing, keeps them going on. We obviously need water to survive. Without, after a certain period of time, we can't survive without the water. Okay, so what do we see in this conflict active phase, and this is the one we're talking about. This is what is concurrent when we have gout. It's arthritis plus this conflict active stage at the same time together. So the symptoms, I'm going to give them to you in short, and then I'm going to go through and give you a little bit more of a description of what's happening for each one. So we have water retention, and how much water retention we have is based on the degree and the intensity of this abandonment existence conflict that we're experiencing, this fish out of water conflict, okay? Now, also increased or elevated uric acid levels, also increased urea and creatinine, or creatinine, I guess, depending upon how you pronounce it, and then a decreased urine output. Okay, one at a time. So, with water retention, what are some of the signs that we often see with this, if it's marked enough? Baggy eyes, swollen hands, feet, ankles. Now, there are different types of weight gain in the world, but one of the types is related to this conflict, especially when it's a persistent one. What's going to happen is this excess water that we're storing over the course of time is actually going to be stored predominantly in the fat tissue. So let's imagine a person feels really, maybe they feel abandoned, like maybe they're haven't been in a relationship for a long time and they really miss that and they really want, but they just haven't found the right partner. And a lot of times we see rapid weight gain when a person gets paired up with somebody else. A lot of times it's due to this because it resolves this conflict. It's pretty miraculous. So it's not the only reason, but that's a very common reason we see. Now, the next one on the list that I mentioned was the elevated uric acid levels. Now, okay, through conventional medicine, this has been linked to a diet high in protein, but here's the thing. Vegetarians can also have high uric acid. Why? Because vegetarians and meat eaters alike can suffer abandonment and existence conflicts. Okay, what else? Elevated urea and creatinine levels. Okay, normally urea and creatinine are excreted with the urine as a waste product. Okay, this happens as part of the protein metabolism process. Okay, but in the case of an active abandonment or existence conflict, what we have is the recycling of these substances into protein, which provides nutrition. Imagine this, we go back to our stuck in the desert example. You're out there, you don't have water, you don't have food. What is your body going to do? It's going to put these biological programs into drive, and it's going to do everything possible to keep the organism, here we're talking about human beings, alive. Same thing can happen for animals, okay? So when we see uremia, or what they call kidney insufficiency, coming about, we have to look to see if this is what's happening. Because it's serving a biological purpose. So far, any questions? Because I know I've covered a lot, and it's probably new information for most people, unless you're kind of steeped in GNM. So if you have any questions, great. If you think of them later on when you're watching the replay, by all means, ask away, because this is all about learning. This is all about education, and getting this information out there so people are aware that there's a way to deal with, obviously, gout in this case, but all the topics we talk about with Mind Body Talk on chronic pain. The goal is to really empower people to have this education so that they can go forward and know that there's a pathway that they might not have looked at before that's going to help them understand what's happening, and know that there are new pathways and approaches to healing that is going to get them through this. So let's continue on with some of the more technical. So I also said that when we're conflict active with this abandonment existence conflict, that you have a decreased urine output. So it's going to be more concentrated then, have that dark yellow color to it. And also, people might notice that their stool is drier and harder because that excess water is going to be absorbed from the intestinal tract. So now let's check in a couple of things. We can have this urine excretion decreasing, meaning the amount that you're urinating every day is going to be getting smaller and smaller. Well, it's going to, depending upon how big the conflict is, it's going to be dictated by this. Okay, so it can, in some cases, create the state of oliguria, where you have about, now you're going to have to translate this if you're not using milliliters, but 150. Oh, I did write this down wrong. I'm pretty sure it was 150 to 400 milliliters, but I wrote it wrong. So that would be the oliguria. Okay, just checking my notes here because these numbers don't roll off my head, I gotta tell you. So, and the anuria is less than 50 milliliters per day. So just because we have an explanation from German New Medicine doesn't mean that we shouldn't have conventional medical attention to some of these concerns. Understanding it helps us to decide how and what to do with it, and that's why this whole blending of the knowledge of the science of German New Medicine with conventional medical wisdom together is going to be so powerful once that all becomes mainstream together. But so we want to make sure we keep an eye on all of this, but those symptoms in and of themselves are not your body malfunctioning. Let's just say it that way. It's not your body malfunctioning. It's just having to go to an extreme based on the extremity of the conflict. Okay. So now, if this conflict prolongs and doesn't have a break, it doesn't stop and go into the healing phase and then maybe restart up again, or just just be done and was a once and done, for example. If we have a prolonged conflict of this sort, what you may see, remember we talked about the growth of the proliferation of the kidney collecting tubule cells. Now, you may see, if this continues on for a prolonged period of time, a flat or cauliflower-shaped growth of cells. Okay, sometimes, well, oftentimes then this is diagnosed as a renal cell carcinoma. Again, not the body malfunctioning, just doing its job, but it hits a certain threshold based on the extremity and the prolonged duration of the conflict, and so that's what would be seen. Now, let's imagine we come to a conflict resolution, and how we come about that conflict resolution can occur in a number of ways. Now, GNM therapy will look at practical solutions to that, and just the understanding of it and trying to find a way to emotionally or psychologically heal that. On the aside, I often use EFT, which is an energy therapy or matrix reimprinting, but that's not a GNM approach. But I find it to be a very effective approach if used with the knowledge about GNM. No matter what we do with GNM, we want to make sure that we are not interrupting the healing process, that we're not exacerbating any symptoms. You just have to have the knowledge of how to go about it. And so there are ways to heal these conflicts. And that's the blessing, as I mentioned before, is that people who've gone on with chronic pain think there may not be a way out. There is a way to begin to get a handle on this, manage it, bring the symptoms down, and so on and so forth. So now, what happens? We finally get we follow a mode, we are able to get into this healing phase, okay? Where this abandonment or existence conflict is no longer active, okay? What comes in and breaks down, remember we have these excess cells there now. We have the growth in the kidney collecting tubule cells. So What do we need? Here's the beautiful thing. Fungi, or fungi, depending upon how you say it, fungi, or mycobacteria, such as TB, tubercular bacteria. Believe it or not, these little buddies in our bodies are there to assist healing processes. That's a biggie to let sink in, isn't it? Like, the body creates these to help with these healing processes. Remember, you no longer need these extra cells. So what's going to happen? The body uses what it has there, in this case, fungi or mycobacteria, which would be the TB bacteria. Remove those cells that are no longer needed. Think of it like a little Pac-Man. It's the visual I like to use. Now, that water that we've retained during that conflict activity is released. You start peeing a lot. So frequent urination, at this point, if you're aware of these cycles, and we can have these cycles, we don't have to even have them necessarily related to gout. I mean, you can have this water retention conflict on its own, okay? Or water retention. You can have this abandonment or existence conflict with the accompanying water retention on its own without any other conflicts at the same time, or you can have it in combination with a number of different biological programs. Even if it's alone, though, even if you have it on a small level, it's not intense, you'll notice when you resolve it, if you know GNM, you'll start to say, oh, yeah, look, that was the pattern. Look at me following this biological program. I knew when this was going to happen. I knew that I was going to go into resolution. I knew I was going to have these symptoms. Okay, so what else besides release of the water, like beginning to urinate a lot? Like the kind of nights where you get up to go to the bathroom like 6 times. It maybe not always that many, but this is not surprising in this case. Okay, you can have cloudy urine. You can have pain due to the swelling. Okay, you can have night sweats. If you have a lot of inflammation, it might be called nephritis at this point. If fungi instead of the TB or the bacteria are used to break down the extra cells, you might see a diagnosis of renal candidiasis. What if you have TB helping to break down those extra cells? Okay, bacterial kidney infection would often be the diagnosis then. So this brings a new understanding. So imagine if you knew that. Now, instead of creating a new conflict for a person, because now you've gone into this healing phase, and you have these symptoms, and instead of saying, oh no, look, I have all these problems, you would say, oh wow, my body's healing. I may not really like the symptoms, but understanding why they're coming about is so, it's protective. It keeps you from thinking that you're going to have, you're having new issues, which keeps new cans of worms, new conflicts from stemming out, because a lot of times we have one conflict and or symptoms in a healing phase, and now we have a whole slew of other biological programs stemming from those because we have multiple conflicts stemming from just the experience of the symptoms we're going through. It can snowball very quickly into multiple biological programs occurring at the same time, or we can then also begin to, with this understanding, really get a handle on this. And maybe you can't get it to come to a screeching halt right away, and a lot of times you wouldn't want to anyway. But the understanding of this and the kind of the reprogramming of the mind to say, this is a healing symptom, I should expect this, or this is me being in the conflict active phase. I understand this now, I'm getting the hang of it. And then we have less and less fear, more understanding, and we're able to see what's being activated bioemotionally, and we get through this process. Okay, let's see if there's anything else, because I wanted to cover a couple other things, but not very much. We're close to the end, okay? Okay, this is important. With this healing phase of this abandonment and existence conflict, the tubercular secretions that we're going to see with that cell breakdown are going to be high in protein. That means the urine is going to be high in protein. This is where we often see proteinuria or albuminuria. Sorry, I pronounced that wrong. Forgive me. I don't have a medical background. I have a mental health background, so I'm doing the best I can with this. But at the same time, now this is where it gets really interesting. And it just is it's so profound how the body works so well it's so orchestrated. It's so like a perfect concert. The blood protein level is going to be lower while this urine protein level is higher. And why is that? Because the body's using what's in the blood to balance out the loss of it through the urine. But that does not mean that your medical team shouldn't be monitoring your protein levels, and that proper protein and nutrition shouldn't be finding its way into your body at this point. It absolutely needs to be. So this needs to be ideally monitored. Of course, if it's a very short conflict and is hardly a blink on the radar screen, we probably wouldn't be having this conversation. But obviously, if there are big enough issues going on, you're probably working with a medical team at that point, or a doctor. So this is crucial. Now, we can have other complications. What if this is an ongoing process? We have this, we go into the conflict resolution or healing phase, we go back into conflict activity. Each time, if you complete the healing phase, that breakdown of the cells, it takes out, if you're able to complete it, it takes out all those extra cells and then a little bit more. It's kind of like the best surgeon in the world is going to just know exactly. It's going to take out just a little extra, just not too much, but just a little extra, just make sure you got everything. So, but if that happens over and over again, that's how we get this. If we have the growth, we have the breakdown, but it takes a little extra, a little extra, a little extra. That's where you get more of the cirrhotic kidney. Or what if you really never get into the healing phase, or you never fully complete it? We can also see this tubulous kidney insufficiency then. Now, of course, anything that goes on long enough without a break and without understanding, this could lead to kidney failure for some people. Sometimes people need to be on dialysis, but the whole point of today's conversation is to help people become aware so that these cycles can be understood and stopped before they're going on and on and on and on at a great level of intensity, so that we can talk about preventative medicine. GNM is the ultimate preventative medicine. It's not going to prevent your body from running through the programs. The knowledge of it is going to help you keep your body in its optimal state of being. And optimal sometimes means going through these biological programs, which we have called disease, but the whole point is we want to have people not chronically in something, because nobody wants to feel that all the time. So we have then the beauty of understanding these cycles, helping people break the cycles, and that emotional awareness and that psychological awareness that comes about not just understanding the GNM, but the healing that can happen on a psychological and emotional level. What I have seen as a psychotherapist and a mind-body specialist working with chronic pain and illness, and the emotional aspects of it, is that these things that we're dealing with, whether it's gout or a cancer diagnosis or this or that, once we really get to the roots of it, we understand the depths of it, and we start to heal it on all the levels, on the level of mind, body, spirit. What we have is a transformative experience that not only addresses the physical challenges we were going through, or maybe somebody just showed up with a mental health diagnosis or diagnoses. So we're addressing those. Maybe physical symptoms haven't shown up for that person, but we are addressing all of that. And when we do that, other changes happen in a person's life. It's so transformative. It's never just what's showing up as what we think the problem is. There's normally more to it from a deeper, say, metaphysical level. So this healing some aspect of ourselves often heals all these other aspects, helps us to transform in other areas of our life. I've said this before, but if you haven't heard me say it, I just wanted to put it out there because sure, everybody wants to physically feel better if they're not feeling well, and optimally if they've been feeling okay. But we also have to, we don't have to, but we have a greater experience of life when we're feeling emotionally at the top of our game and feeling vibrant and happy and joyful and hopeful in our lives. So I hope today was helpful for you. I hope the information in here was helpful for you. If you have any questions at all, just please go ahead, let me know in the comments section, or go ahead and message me, or you can click the little button to schedule. There's a link above here where you could schedule a 15-minute wellness consultation. We can touch base and see what's going on for you and how I may be able to help you. Or feel free to join my chronic pain mind body empowerment group. Also, if you want to learn more about GNM, there's a link there. You can start to learn more about it as well. Dr. Hammer, the doctor who discovered this, I see him as a genius. He's no longer with us. He passed away last year. He was able to bring this to the world, and so I really I am profoundly grateful for that. I never got to meet him, but it's such helpful information. So just spread it with the world. Spread it to the world if you can. All right, thanks again. Take care, and we'll see you next week. Bye-bye.